Hello, welcome back, everyone. This is part two of chapter 11 Supply Chain Management Risk in Supply Chains. All right. So, in the first part, we talked about supply chain strategies. Now, in the second part, we are really talking about risk. So, more reliance on supply chains means more risk. So, the thing is that if you have fewer suppliers, you're increasing your dependence upon them. So, like the US Schwinn example, when they relied too heavily on Taiwan manufacturing company, they became kind of, um, they became vulnerable. So, when they went for Chapter 11, they went bankrupt. Taiwanese company grabbed all their business. But on the other hand, if you have too many suppliers, that's also risky because you can't manage your quality. On to this, there are other risks as well. Globalization, when you're getting your raw materials internationally or you're selling internationally, the reliability of your vendor, quality risk, political currency. So there's lots of risk. So, what are some of the strategies for risk and mitigation tactics? You know, so some of these are the first part is just to research your risk, just know what you're vulnerable to, plan for it. So try to look for your potential disruptions and prepare responses that, in case we have an earthquake tomorrow, how are we going to deal with the earthquake? And also have very flexible and diverse supply chains. So let's look at these tactics in detail. So in your book, let's go to example table 11.3 and give you some examples. So we go bit by bit so you can kind of see an idea of these risks. The first is supplier failure to deliver. And the risk reduction tactic is use multiple supplier. The example is McDonald's. When they were going to go to Russia, they made a plan 6 years before they opened their plant, and everything was monitored to ensure that they had the local suppliers in order to get tomatoes and lettuce and meat so that they could have a McDonald's in Russia. The second is failure. So this is where we do selection and training. So Darden Restaurants has extensive controls on audits to make sure that their quality is up to the par. The third is logistical delays. So here what we do as a strategy is we have multiple redundant transportation modes, and Walmart has its own trucking fleets in many distribution centers so that they can address any logistic delays. The fourth is distribution, where we just do very careful selection and monitoring. An example here is for Toyota. They train all their dealers. Indeed, when they had that sudden braking thing happen a few years ago and they had to do the recall, if Toyota did not have all their TPS and their dealers all across the world that kind of help them out, they might not have been able to overcome that challenge. The next is information loss. So here the example is to have redundant databases. So Boeing uses a state-of-art international communication system to handle all their data. The next one is political risks. So in this case, what Hard Rock Cafe does is it franchises their stores rather than franchises their stores and licenses them rather than outright ownership. Economic, here the risk is for the fluctuation of the yen versus the dollar or euro. So Honda and Nissan do hedging. And what they also do is they move more and more manufacturing out of Japan so that they are less vulnerable to those risks. Natural catastrophe, alternate sourcing. So Toyota again has a lot of their suppliers in different geographic regions to hedge against tsunamis and earthquakes in their home country of Japan. And lastly, theft and vandalism. So here we just buy insurance. So an example is of the domestic port radiation, where the US government has set monitors to scan their ships coming in. So shipments do get misrouted, they do get stolen. So again, we need a lot of tracking innovations to expedite shipments. The next part is other kind of risks and issues in the supply chain. So we have something called a bullwhip effect, where a very stable demand leads to a lot of distortion along the supply chain. So some of the issues are, the first is local optimization, where you run a special, but that creates fluctuations. Another incentive is where you push the merchandise for sales that have not occurred, and largely large lots. So these are all issues. So how do supply chain managers address these issues? They do it by creating these opportunities. The first is really have very accurate pull data. All right. So this is point of sale data. So when you buy something and goes beep at your grocery store, that sends a signal in the back room that wow, we have a customer who bought a certain box of cereal. So that's called accurate point of sales or POS data. POS standing for point of sales data. The second is just to have smaller lots sizes, maybe having a less than truckload than a full truckload. The third is having a single stage control of replenishment. So it's either the retailer or the warehouser who needs to control what information you have. This is also called vendor managed inventory, VMI. Other opportunities are having some kind of software. So one software is called CPFR throughout the supply chain, just to track your information on inventory. A next strategy is to have blanket orders against which the actual orders are released, and really standardizing most of your information throughout the supply chain. Okay. One more strategy is postponement. So if you need to do some kind of postponement, you hold on to it as long as is possible and maybe do it towards the end. A lot of companies are also doing electronic ordering and funds transfer, and also drop shipping or special packaging where you might send the product directly to your customer rather than going through the seller. So a lot of computer companies are doing the drop shipping and special packaging. Okay. So building the supply chain, we also need to look at your suppliers, find good suppliers. So at a basic, ensure that your suppliers are certified, they're qualified, they're educated, they have all the certification needed in the industry. The next stage is sending the products out. This is called logistics management. So logistics includes transportation, and oftentimes many companies outsource logistics. So when you look at shipping systems, most of the products in the US are sent through trucking, and indeed, trucking moves the vast majority of products. So, again, you have one or two trucks, you can start your own trucking company. The second is railroads. Railroads carries large bulk loads, but it's not very flexible. You have to have a rail line for that. Air freight is very fast, very flexible, but it's very, very expensive. So, you can't really be shipping really heavy things because the cost is really high. And for bulky products, we can also use our waterways. We also have pipelines for oil, natural gas, and other chemical products. And multimodal is a term where you combine shipping methods. Okay? So that's an overview of all the shipments. So again, generally the trade-off is faster shipping is more expensive and has smaller shipment styles. The next stage is warehousing. So warehousing can be expensive. But recently, more and more warehousing companies offer other functions for value added. They can consolidate, they can break down the bulk, they can do cross docking or channel assembly. So, again, these are strategies whereby warehousing is more than just a place to store goods. 3PL is a term which is called third party logistics. So, this is an idea about outsourcing logistics so that you can reduce your inventory, your costs. And 3PL providers also now do other things such as assembly and testing and customers just as a value add. All right. So, even within supply chain, you have to be conscious about your personal ethics and ethics within the supply chain and regarding the environment. So the ISM, which is Institute of Supply Management, they have these principles and standards around ethics. Okay. In terms of logistics or sustainability, we also look for other trends, and those trends are really coming in return or reverse logistics. So when you have reached an end of life on your computer, can you return it? And can a computer manufacturer open up that product in a closed loop supply chain and maybe reuse some parts for future assembly purposes? So you could have assembly sustainability in your supply chain in forward and in reverse logistics. Okay. So the last part we're going to do is looking at some metrics. So the first metric is assets committed to inventory. Here's the formula. So again, if Home Depot has 11 billion in inventory and total assets of 44 billion, the percentage invested in inventory would be 11.4 divided by 44 times 100. So at any one time, Home Depot has 25% of its assets invested in inventory. So, as a comparison, for Home Depot, you can look at